So e-paper displays are really cool, and Home Assistant and ESPHome make it very easy to create a little custom e-paper dashboard. And in this video, I'll show you how to do it. So this dashboard that I've got configured really only uses a few components. You've got the screen, there's an ESP32 board, and then with the screen, you can buy a little hat that allows it to communicate with the ESP32 board. That's really it as far as the hardware. Everything on screen, it's really the software that makes it all fancy. What we've got on display is live time, date, weather conditions, a bunch of sensors, and statuses from my house. And down at the very bottom, it's probably hard to see, but there's a little bitty line down there. And what that is that there's even a chart that's going to plot temperature over time. And you can adjust all the parameters for what sensor you want tracked, how long you want to track it, and all kinds of stuff with a chart. Now, all of this is made possible through ESPHome, which has really cool features for display. And the fact that it hooks into Home Assistant means you can pull all kinds of things out of Home Assistant into your display dashboard. Now, right now, you'll see I've got one sensor that's not reading. It's because that sensor only updates 4 times a day, and I have actually restarted Home Assistant since its last update, so it doesn't have a current value from that sensor. But all this stuff is actually pulling in from my Home Assistant. The trickiest part of this is actually the weather, because these are being pulled out of a forecast, and recent changes to Home Assistant have changed the way you have to get information out of weather forecasts. But everything else is pretty simple, and so I'll walk you through how to set up the hardware, which again, that is very simple, and then we'll look at how to set up the software, where you can use my configuration as a demo to show you how to pull in sensors, how to pull in time and dates, how to pull in statuses, how to pull in weather, and how to plot a graph wherever you want on screen. You can then just take it and modify it to put whatever elements wherever you want on your own dashboard. Now, you will see once a minute, this thing will refresh. And e-ink is just not a high-speed display. It is very low power, though. So that's the trade-off. When it refreshes, it takes a few seconds, but it does not use any power other than the refresh. Everything is held in a charged state, and even if I unplug this thing, the display will stay up. Now, one thing that happens, though, that you do need to be aware of is that ESPHome doesn't keep track of everything. It's just pulling in variables from Home Assistant. So if it loses power, it will have to wait until it can catch new values for all the sensors, and then it will update. So that means that the little chart down here that's building gets reset every time there's a power cycle. So let me show you how this works, right? If I unplug this, the display actually keeps going. There's no battery in this thing, and I'll show you when I plug it back in. It'll boot up, and then you'll get a screen refresh with everything now reset back to default. Now, I actually have built into my configuration, I actually have a button that will allow me to refresh the screen, and so if I push that, I can push a screen refresh, and then you can see I've got all my information is now live and current. I currently have the refresh set to once every minute, and my little enclosure, I have feet on the back, and it's kicked back at about 5 degrees. That way, I've got it standing mostly upright, but with a little back tilt so that it doesn't tip over. So now I'll show you what's in the hardware, which again is very straightforward, and then we'll look at the more complicated pieces of the software environment. Well, let's take a look at the hardware that you're going to need to assemble this, and it's actually a very simple project on the hardware side of things. So I'm going to be using an Adafruit Feather 32. This is the version 1 board. There's no real special reason why I'm using this. It's honestly just because I wanted a board that didn't already have header pins soldered onto it, and this is one that I had. So you really just need any basic ESP32, and it should run this thing just fine. Now, the other component is going to be the screen. And so this is a Waveshare 7.5-inch e-ink or e-paper screen. And if you get the one that comes with the hat, it comes with the interface board that has a plug with wires already adapted to it and a flat cable connector on this end so that you can attach everything pretty easily. And on this, the wires that you're going to need, it's mostly just digital pins. There's a VCC, that's going to be the main power. This thing can run off 3.3 or 5 volts. It also has a pin labeled power, but that's actually a power enable pin, so it doesn't actually need current. And then everything else is just digital communications. This thing's basically an SPI interface, and so there's really not much to it. The couple of things that I would mention about this, just to be careful with. So you probably can't tell, but there's actually a little tear right here in this ribbon cable because I dropped this thing and it twisted and tore the cable right there. So I had to get another one of these displays. So I also cracked the edge on this corner simply by trying to put it into the enclosure I've got. And I didn't even push that hard. It just something loaded right on the edge and this thing cracked. So I actually have another one that I bought, and you know, this stuff isn't cheap. These displays, I think the one without the hat is still like $45 or something, 45 bucks. So be very gentle and careful with these displays. They are extremely fragile. One of the most fragile components I've ever handled. Like I said, I tore the cable very accidentally. I chipped that edge. Again, very light handling. I was not rough with this thing, but you do just want to be very careful because they're too expensive to have to replace like that. So that's the other thing that I would mention about these. With that, the last thing that I will say is you need an enclosure. So I've 3D printed an enclosure for this thing, and I will include step files for this because you probably do want to modify it for your own use. If you want to use a different size screen, or you want a different layout, you could even put like a hole for a screw or something to hang this thing on the wall if you wanted. It's a little thicker probably than I needed to make it, but it is what it is. This one, I've got it made with a little 5-degree kickback so that it's pretty flat looking forward, but it does kind of lean backwards a little bit. I've got a place where I can mount this little adapter board. However, my 3D prints, they aren't really durable, and so I've broken a couple of these, so I may end up just hot gluing this thing in. It's also got a little spot over here for this particular board to set, which again, I'm just going to hot glue that in place, and it's got a little hole so that I can run a USB connector through there. As well, it's got a little cutout here in the bottom so that whenever you go to place the screen in, you don't damage that cable, and then it's just going to be held in once you get the front on just by compression. So with that, again, there's a few things that you might want to modify, so I'll put a step file up there for you. So with that, I'm going to go get this thing wired up and assembled, and after that, we can start looking at the code. All right, so we got everything wired up. Next thing we need to do, and by the way, I did clip out those posts. I'd probably modify those and reprint this thing in a different way so that they were a little stronger. I've coiled the wire just to make it a little less, bulky. So the next thing we're going to do, I've found that the way I built this thing, the little extension isn't really going to be necessary. And so I'm going to show you with the dead panel. So you just take your connector, make sure that this back piece is flipped up, take the flat edge, and make sure it goes in the right spot. Now these are a little tricky because they're pretty floppy, and you don't, like I said, you don't want to tear that cable. So get that thing over there, get it slid in, and then you push that black part down, and then that locks it in, and then roll this thing over, and then fit the panel in like that, and that's it. So that's the process of putting this thing in. I don't even think I'll need to retain that inner board because it's just, this thing isn't going to move that much. Again, if I had it to do over again, I might design it just a touch different, but I think this is going to be good enough. So I've got a couple of these in, and I can show you the back. And I've just got some places for some hex nuts in there so that the screws have something to thread into. The other thing is currently the screen is a little loose. So I'd probably want to do like a little bit of a foam or something around that to hold this into place a little tighter. I didn't want to crush the screen. So this went through a few different iterations, and I ended up leaving it a little loose because I ran through a couple that were too tight and I didn't want to break another screen. That's not how I broke the first screen, but after breaking that one, I was kind of gun shy. So I left plenty of tolerance there for that screen. So at this point, I'm going to finish putting the other two screws, and then we've got access to our USB and we can program this thing. So the first thing we're going to do for the software side is get the template set up to pull forecasts out of Home Assistant. So I'm using the Studio Code add-in to do this on my Home Assistant server. However you access files there and can edit things, that's how you need to go into this, and that's a whole different ball of wax. So at any rate, you're going to go into your configuration folder, your config folder, create a new file. Now I've got mine named forecast. So create a new YAML file. Okay, so I've made a little forecast demo file here so that I can show you, and here's what the code looks like. All right, so this is a template, and so whatever you name this file, also you need to add that to your configurations.yaml. And so here you'll see template, and then I'm including this forecast YAML file. And so what's going on is this is a template system, and so it's got a trigger, and basically it's going to run this thing at startup, and then it will also run it every hour. And what this means, it's going to update the weather forecasts hourly. Now there's two different things that I'm going to be doing, and that means there are two actions in here. Now, both actions are called get forecasts, and this is kind of a new thing that's been added recently, is that a template can run these services. And so weather.getForecasts is how you grab weather data out of the new forecast entities. And so I've got the first one, and it is going to pull hourly forecast. The second one pulls daily forecast. You do have to run it separately for both hourly and daily weather forecasting. But I run those two things, and then I'm updating a bunch of sensors. Now I've got a couple here set up first, and all these do is pull out current weather data. That's actually different than pulling forecast data. And again, that's due to some of the new changes that they've done in Home Assistant. The rest of the sensors are all pulling different hourly or daily forecasts. So you can see it goes like this. I've got a sensor named Weather Forecast H1. For me, that means the next hour's forecast. And I've got it a unique ID, and then it pulls in the hourly forecast from my weather integration. Forecast 0, that's the next forecast hour. So basically it's going hours, okay, pull the next hour's condition, and then that will be updated into this sensor. Each attribute has a different name, and there's a bunch of them. You can do condition, which is like, is it sunny, is it cloudy, is it rainy? You can pull temperatures. I think you can also pull estimated rainfalls, and there's all kinds of things that you can pull out of there. Again, that's more in depth than I want to get to in this video. But then I'm doing that for each hour for both the condition and temperature over the next 3 hours, and I'm doing the same thing over the next 3 days. If you want different items, if you want different time lengths, again, it can either do hours or days, but if you want, more days or more hours, you can just adjust using, again, these numbers and whether you're pulling hour or daily. And that's how you get the data from Home Assistant and collect it into sensors, which can then be read by ESPHome. Now again, whatever you name that file, be sure to include it as a template in your configuration. And now, after you get that thing set up, Home Assistant will run that, and however you've got your triggers set up, that's when it will be ran. Okay, so next up in ESPHome, as always, just go ahead and get your ESP device set up and started with a blank YAML. Again, whatever you want to name it, if you've used ESPHome, it's the same as anything else. Now we'll look at what's special about our code. So I'm going to go into my Epaper dashboard here. Okay, so in the YAML, mostly everything's going to be fairly straightforward. All right, so to pull in time from Home Assistant, I've got a little time component set up, Platform Home Assistant, and I'm just calling that Home Assistant Time. And then all those sensors that you want to pull in, whatever they are, just go look up their entity IDs, and the platform will be Home Assistant. Give it an ID so that you can reference it within ESPHome, and then pull in the entity from Home Assistant. And this also goes for all of the weather stuff that we set up earlier. Now, if it's going to give you some sort of numerical value, you're going to set it up as a sensor, but a lot of stuff comes over as text. So if I scroll down, you'll see text sensors are set up also for a lot of different things like my lock statuses, and then all the weather conditions that I had set up in that configuration. And so this is where all of the weather conditions and temperatures from the forecast come in from that template that we set up. It's all in these text sensors. Now, one of the special things about the weather system is displaying those icons, and here's how that works. You set up another font, and you actually do need to load this file into the ESPHome directory. If you go to this link, it'll show you where to download this font, and then you just put it in the fonts directory in the ESPHome directory of your Home Assistant setup. So basically in this little step, what we're doing is we are loading in all of the Google material design icons. However, that takes up a lot of space. And what's special about these is they are actually text characters, so we can use them kind of like text characters more or less, but they're actually going to be icons. And so we don't want to waste a bunch of memory pulling in every possible icon. And so this glyphs statement basically says, hey, here are the specific glyphs that we want to use. And so you'll see it's got this little slash and then U with 3 zeros, and then it's got this 5-digit F code. So if you want a different icon than what's in this list, here's how you do it. So if we want to look up a different icon to actually use in ESPHome, I'm at pictogrammars/library/MDI, which is Material Design Icons. Now in here, let's say that I wanted a door icon. I can type in door. It brings up all the different possible things that have door in the title in the material design icon library. If I look at door open and click on it, you can see right up here in this bar, this code point. It says F081C. Well, if I scroll down, you'll see right here is that code. So the way you pull in some new icon is it's always going to be this slash U00 and then that icon code. Here's the setup for the graph. Its component is called graph. I've got it named a temp graph. You tell it what sensor you want to log. You set up, hey, how big do you want it to be? How long do you want to log? So I'm going to actually change this to 12 hours. But again, how much data do you want to log? That's up to you. And you can adjust the lines thickness. You can adjust whether or not it has a border. And if you look at the graph component as it's popped up here, there's a ton of options that you can set for your graph. Again, this is just a little baby basic one. We've got the display set up. So the platform here is Waveshare _E-paper. You do have to tell it what model. So I've got a 7.5-inch V2. That's a sticker on the back of the display that you can look up. One of the recent changes in these is you do want to set up this busy pin as inverted. Again, it's just a more recent change. If you look up some of the older configurations that people use, it was causing some funky refreshes. You also want to change this reset duration to 2 milliseconds. You can change the update interval as you wish. I've got mine set up to 60 seconds. And all your pins, again, identified correctly. And then we've got the Lambda. Now this is where the screen setup happens. So I'm not going to go through the big Lambda display setup line by line or anything, because again, it's too complicated and I don't want to make this video crazy long. But the gist of it is you set up a map to pull in all your weather conditions and map them to icons. I'm doing the same thing with my door statuses because it's going to come in as locked or unlocked, and I'm mapping it to icons also. You can draw boxes, you can put in text, you can format stuff and center it different ways or text align it different ways. Here is the line that pulls in the big main icon in the middle for the current weather, and you can see I've got it pulling in from the big MDI font. I've got it centered horizontally, and then here's where it's saying, okay, read the status from the sensor named Weather Now, pull that through the icon map to find which icon to use, then display that thing here using this font centered horizontally. I'll let you look through the rest of this. It's all just a bunch of text and sensors and formatting and stuff like that. The graph I've got down here at the bottom, and so you can use this as examples of how to do all these different things, how to put in sensor states, how to format time and date and all that other stuff. Everything's in here. I'll leave it to you to look at because, again, I don't want this video to be an hour long. But, you know, if you've got any questions, as always, feel free to leave them in a comment and I'll try to address it as I can. And so there you go. You know, I think with the demo code that I put out there, it shows you enough that you can basically build the vast majority of any type of display that you would want, right? Any type of configuration you want on the screen. You know, I'm showing you how to draw boxes, how to put in icons, how to put in text and format different sensors, statuses, how to map things to icons, how to draw a chart. It's all in there. So I think if you dig through that configuration and look at it, you can really figure out how to pull in just about anything you want onto this screen and arrange it however you want. You don't have to have yours looking like this. That's up to you. So I think that's gonna wrap up this video. I mean, I think these things are super cool. You know, I don't even have a clock in my house, so I'm finally gonna have one that updates at least to the minute. It's just a neat little project and a nice, cool thing to have. And like I said, these things are really cool because they are so power efficient. You know, you unplug it, the thing stays on. These things use so little power that I was trying to run it off of a little power bank, and it wouldn't stay on. It didn't draw enough current to keep the power bank on because, again, it literally doesn't really do much of anything until it updates that screen, and then it draws very little power even when it's updating that screen. And it just looks cool. So I think that's going to be it for this this video. So if you got any questions or anything, as always, feel free to leave a comment down below. Otherwise, as always, I appreciate your time. Thanks.